We
So I have the three mighty gents with us with me today, and it is whenever you're going to hear this, it's today in some places, but it's tomorrow elsewhere, and particularly it's tomorrow in Australia. And gentlemen, I've been starting with that recently just to kind of indicate that time is somewhat of an invention. And then there's something called eternal time, and I'd like to even call sacred time or even liberation time. So whether it's 19, when did the alpha start again, gentlemen?
1906.
Whether it's 1906 or 2023, liberation time is always, I would like to say, in vogue. And we're going to talk about not necessarily a vogue from a fashion standpoint, but what does liberation and integration and academic schools and so-called elite schools and our presence here in America mean as we kind of walk this journey of peace? Can we create peace on earth, goodwill toward women, children, and men? And particularly, we're going to focus on Alpha Phi Alpha, fraternity that you may or may not be aware of, but I have three gentlemen that's going to kind of bring us up to speed with with their historical legacy, and it's a significant historical legacy. Um, and I guess I want to mention that whether in terms of that 1906 period, just as a historical context, I'm always urge people to kind of keep in mind that something was going on in the spirit world and the ancestor world and the political world and economic world between 1900 and 1915. When you think of the fraternities starting, the sorority starting, the urban league starting, Booker T. Washington had his deal going on with the Black Business League. You had Madam J.C. Walker going on with her beauty. Uh, you had a lot taking place, the Boule, the Alphas, the fraternities, the Kappas, the Deltas, you name it. And so this is just it's important for us to remember that in my mind, gentlemen, we're in that same period again. We have our legacy organizations that are still in existence, but where are we kind of moving in terms of our pursuit of liberation and liberty for folks that will kind of live two or three or four generations after us. But let's take the deep dive historically in terms of 1906. And L. Lucas is going to kind of kick us off, and his brother's also going to kind of weigh in because they had a chance to do I'll say a pre-audition on Mondays at Beinecke last week or so. And they're going to reference that kind of context of dissemination, but also we're going to kind of brainstorm and add on a part two. So Al, kick us off a little bit, and gentlemen, feel free to kind of introduce yourself and weigh in about why we are here today.
Okay. So my role is to give you a little bit of context on top of the context that you just gave about what was going on in that era. And I usually like to start off by giving a shout out to those who've been working on publicizing the failure of New Haven's HBCU movement to succeed in getting the first HBCU back in the early mid 1800s. And so after that event fails, we then have a civil war in the United States. And after the Civil War, we have Reconstruction. And what I like to say about these gentlemen that we're talking about is that they're the children of Reconstruction. So one of the reasons that you see so much energy around this is because what they saw was Black excellence at its highest levels. Black congressmen, Black senators, Black business owners, Black Wall Street. So their existence, what they were surrounded by, the manifestation of possibility were actually right in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had no real filter about the possibility that they could achieve what they wanted to achieve. And then, of course, Jim Crow hits. They see all the pushback, and so they end up having to understand that in order to take full advantage of the American dream, they're going to actually have to do some of this stuff on their own and push through. So in 1906, up in Ithaca, New York, we have some men that are there that are studying. They had been there for a couple of years, gotten together. Some of them were greatly influenced by the Niagara movement, which happened in Niagara, New York, not that far from Ithaca, New York. There was a letter from W.B. Du Bois to young men, and a junior Niagara movement that we don't talk about as much as the actual Niagara movement that was going on. And all of these men were potentially influenced by this. Of course, this was a day when people actually read. There was no social media. Social media was writing, newspapers, periodicals, posters, magazines. And those were things that were passed around, information that was shared. So these men who had come from various, mostly HBCUs, but had grown up, some had grown up together, some knew relatives of each other, all got together, were concerned about making sure that they were able to succeed, in this case at Cornell University to start, and got together a social study club, which included everybody that was there, all of the Black folk that were there to try to make sure that they succeeded in an environment that was not as welcoming as it could be. And as a result of the success that they had, once they decided to institutionalize that as a fraternity, they then decided this is a good model. We should take it to other places. So off went to Toronto, University of Toronto. They went back down south to Howard and to Virginia Union. They went out to Michigan. They went to New Haven, Connecticut, Yale University, down to Columbia in New York, and pushed that model in those places. And that's what led to Alpha Phi Alpha being established on those chapters of Alpha Phi Alpha being established on those campuses, even before most of the other Black Greek organizations were even created. So the one at Yale still started in 1909. And as you know, most of the other Black Greek organizations come after that period of time, except for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which came in 1908, but everyone else is after that. So this chapter that was part of Yale University at New Haven happened before there were even other Black Greek literate organizations besides Alpha Kappa Alpha. And then I'll pitch it over from there to Brother Legend, who has done yeoman's work on those men who were here and their involvement in and around Yale and New Haven.
Excellent, excellent. Brother Legend, Mr. Al Lucas has passed the mic to you, and the voice you were hearing was from Al Lucas, who really the leadership of the New Haven Board of Alders in terms of the legislative services and a Yale undergrad. Brother Legend.
Yes. Thank you for having me as a historian and former higher education professional to kind of continue the story about Zeta Chapter. It started with an incident in New Haven. Two Negro students who went to a restaurant, asked for service for food, and was refused on the basis of their color. And this triggered a national event of this time. All over, there was press about this refusal of service. And little did they know that one of those students was studying to be a lawyer at law school. And with the backing of some of his professors at Yale, along with the support of Booker T. Washington, it triggered them eventually settling the case, because it was like, oh, we can't compete against this. This guy is well too resourced. He has so many big figures that's backing him, and so they ended up settling out the case, and he won and got damages. But that case triggered the Black students at New Haven to galvanize, but also just across the country, and utilizing what was happening at Cornell as the genesis. Saw this connection and this movement that came together. So then you have the establish of Michigan and Yale that happened on April 10th, 1909. what I think is fascinating about that particular period while they established this chapter was the fact that what does it mean to be a Black student in 1909 during that period and establishing this organization at Yale?
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, what with further research, it was looking into some of the classes that were taught. And I thought what was so fascinating was uh, you had these specific, it was three classes that courses that were, some of them were requirement based on certain programs that you were in, but uh, things that some of the course descriptions were related to the Negro, the Negro in connection to crime, immigration, and liquor.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, let me be as a scholar, you want to look at this thing objectively. Is there any other courses uh, that were taught that was in connection to a group of people? And there wasn't. Uh, and so uh, it was very important to establish this chapter as to organize on Yale's campus and to combat it against this, but also to try to successfully thrive in these types of institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, as uh, um, as time, oh, actually, I want to at least give honor to the 8 individuals that we established this.
Please.
Okay, so you have Jefferson Gatherford Ish Jr. Uh, he went to Yale College, 1909, graduated, was affiliated with, he previously went to Talladega College, became president of University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, and as a very successful businessman. You have Harold Mary Bright Kingsley, graduated from Yale Divinity School,
Mm.
1911.
Mm.
Also a graduate of Talladega College, became a very prominent preacher. At one point, I think it was in 1935, he had the largest Black church in North America.
Mm.
Next individual is Dr. Arthur Edward Johnson. Now, although he went to medical school and or Yale Medical School, but he went as a non-graduate student, so he didn't earn a degree, but he took courses at the time. But affiliated with Howard University, he went on to pursue being a physician. But he died early. He died in the 1920s.
Mm.
But next individual is Dr. Ira McGlynn Mason.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Yale College, another HBCU affiliate with Talladega College, Tuskegee Howard. He became a very noted professor in Chicago and a physician there. There was even talks that they was going to name a street after him.
Mm.
I wanted to dig a little bit more research to
Mm-hmm.
find that anecdote about him. Then you have Reverend Samuel Richard Morsell, another Yale Divinity graduate. Now, he also, along with pastoring, he became a prominent leader in the YMCA. And one interesting anecdote about him was that he took on a position in Westchester, a YMCA position in Westchester County in New York. And there was this, they wanted to keep the YMCA segregated. And
Mm.
he said it has to be integrated.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up costing him his job. But he did this out of principle because he knew that this was a big shift in terms of the country, in terms of the conversation about integration. And so this received a lot of news during this day. Another another prominent individual, Dr. William Porter Norcom,
Yes.
Yale College, affiliated with Howard University. And one anecdote about him was he performed one of the when we think about the conversation about abortion and pro-choice,
Mm-hmm.
he performed an abortion that uh, it was safe and everything. But again, when you think about that time period, talking about like the 1920s, 1930s, uh, there was trying to attack him for performing this abortion for this lady who needed it.
Right, right.
And, um, then you have the next individual, Philip Manuel Thorne Jr. He's the one that started it off. So this is the individual that won the lawsuit and went to Yale Law School. He didn't attend any HBCUs, or we couldn't find any. I couldn't find any specific affiliations with him with that. But when you think of the NAACP, the specifically the Legal Defense Fund,
Mm-hmm.
he's one of the earliest members that helped shape that particular anchor of the organization. And then the last individual we have is Reverend Christopher Herbert Yearwood. Uh, Went to Yale Divinity School, was a board of trustees of Wilberforce University, and among the 8 individuals with him was really unfortunate. He passed away in 1913. So, although the chapter was established in 1909, his life ended very tragically, much, much earlier, but still a to know that he was a board of trustees of Wilberforce before his death, that
Mm.
shows that these individuals were, all of them, I mean, pioneers, everything when we think of it in terms of the mystique of what makes the fraternity, they exemplified that. And it's this particular history actually uh, is not even referenced in our fraternity history book. And this past Monday, this was the first time introducing
Mm.
these individuals to Yale University, but also to the fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really important to make sure that we can honor these 8 individuals, uh, and as because these are the earliest members of the fraternity, not just
Yes.
they help establish Zeta chapter, but the earliest members of the fraternity. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, this is just a significant moment, and I think to highlight them, to honor them, and to observe and recognize them. Uh, and uh, we hope to see more research that centers Black voices in these spaces and making sure it's aftermath of everything that's going on with affirmative action. And we can't talk about race in the admission selection process, but then what does it mean in terms of our contributions at these elite institutions? And
Fantastic.
this is one of them.
Fantastic. And February will be a great month, whether you want to call it Black History Month or African Genesis Month. But I hate the fact that sometimes we get segregated into just that one 28, 29-day focus versus the 24/7, 365 reality of our existence. Dr. White, let's bring you in a little bit here. In addition to keeping the New Haven school system kind of afloat and seeking quality from an instructional standpoint, you're also a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha. So share with us what you've heard your two brethren to talk about.
Sure. So for me, of course, hearing all of Latif's research as well as being part of this chapter has always been a source of pride. Through the fraternity, that was also my entry point in doing work in New Haven, getting involved in activities, working at the Q House when I was an undergrad at Yale. All of that was connected through the fraternity, which the goals of it are to build build a strong brotherhood to serve community. So
Mm-hmm.
in doing that, I've had that experience. It's connected me through the years to current undergrads on campus, going back all the way through the years that I've been in school, long since out. But it is a bond that connects people that I would, in no other circumstance, would I necessarily know. Someone who's graduating this year. I just had my 30th college reunion, so there's nothing that would connect across that, but connecting with these brothers, it's as seamless as family, connecting across these years. And I think it's important, especially as we are the oldest Black student organization on Yale's campus, to continue to engage in that. The experiences of helping to establish the house, the AFM Cultural Center, all of those things come out of this experience. And being, like I said, for me, it helped begin my citizenship in New Haven.
The three of you, just looking at you and hearing Latif's kind of context and Al's referencing, really, you hear this term Great Migration, in whatever period you want to think of the Great Migration. We've been migrating for since 1619 or before. You bring in the Spanish history. So our migration movements have certainly been fascinating. Latif, take me back just briefly to I want to emphasize, to share again that it was birthed out of protest. You hear about Nat Turner and then Mark Vesey, and even I like to reference people to kind of, I throw out the word David Walker to folks, and they'll say who, and I say, well, just look them up. But we've been protesting on a large scale, small scale, and some people say protesting has been ineffective, but on the contrary, you guess it's part of our legacy, and there are some successes. The location in New Haven, is it possible? I doubt whether that store is still, or that restaurant is still standing. But has your research proven what block or what part of New Haven it might have? I'm just thinking, Al and Paul, if some sort of plaque or something needs to be put up in that location, to the extent that we could identify it.
Yes. Oh, so that's a very good question. The restaurant is called the Grinning Brothers. I don't think that restaurant exists anymore. Uh, However, I would say that in terms of protests, and in connection with how what galvanized to establish the chapter, for the 114-year history has been a central thing. When you think about the 1960s, and Dr. Uh, uh, Paul White, he mentioned this, the African American Cultural Center, studies, BSET, okay? This all came from a period of let's organize, let's come together. Now, these are major pillars within the Yale community, not just Black community, like Yale community. We know the AFM House, we know, and to know these things, that Zeta chapter had a hand in leading in that movement, and continues to do so throughout, from another Zeta chapter alum, John 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 Kenneth Johnson, who helped recognize Brother Martin Luther King's Day on Yale University, right? And so that happened in 2001. So it is something about us as a people coming together, organizing, and creating change, but a lasting change that still exists. I think is the hallmark of not just the fraternity, but definitely this chapter.
Excellent. And we have about 40 minutes or so, everyone. So let's just, as the spirit moves us. But Al, Brother Lucas, I'm going to ask you a question that I've posed to you prior, sometimes in private and just in casual conversation. But I've just admired and been bemused, and actually sometimes jealous about your continued 3 to 4 decade commitment to working with youth and the young people on campus. Talk to me about what's kind of inspired you to remain just so involved and passing on. We may have some wisdom, we may have some ignorance, but even whatever we have to pass on, the students can learn from it. So share with me what's kind of sparked your commitment, I'll say your diligence to kind of being in the midst of the young people for really, and I'm not trying to put you on blast, but at least 3 decades after graduation.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our callings. I think that happens to be one of mine. Brother Legend, what is the inscription in the history book? What is it?
The,
Who is the
the,
history book dedicated to?
the development of, well, the development of Negro youth.
To the youth who march onward and upward toward the light, is
Mhm.
There you
why it
go.
is respectfully dedicated.
Right. So even in choosing this organization, part of that process for me was always about the fact that in its DNA is a focus on development of younger people into leaders.
Mhm.
And so it's something I've been doing my whole life, and I get great pleasure out of it. But yeah, and then bringing other people into it and along with it has been a great experience. Because I grew up in New York City, coming to New Haven was not like coming any place unfamiliar to me. So it was a relatively easy and seamless transition to walk off campus into the community and start working with young people. But it also was facilitated by the fact that the organization, this particular organization, has a very big focus on doing community work, and especially with young Black men. And so that was a nice little piece of harmony between something I was already interested in and finding an organization that also was around to be supportive of it. So, now, like you said, I've been doing it for a long time. So now I get fathers and kids who tell me that I mentored their fathers, stopping me in various places. So it's great to see, and I think it's just part of what my core, just part of what my core philosophy about being valuable, as you would say, the great quote about service is the rent we pay for the space we take on the planet, right? So we all choose to do it in different ways. That just happens to be one of the ways that I've been able to actually be able to use the talents and skills I have to help other people along.
Well, shout out to you and shout out to all three of you gentlemen and to all the members of your fraternity. Just wondered, and again, let's kind of freelance for a second. In terms of your, have you had a chance to present yet to your national organization, or you referenced, Lateef, that some of this information you've uncovered is really kind of pristine and new, so to speak. I mean, I just wonder whether you've had a chance to kind of whether your upcoming annual meeting. I don't recall the name of what you call you guys your annual meeting, but if you had a chance,
Convention, yes.
your convention, whether you had a chance to present there or.
Yes, actually. So I received backing from the highest levels of our fraternity in terms of my scholarship as it relates to Zeta chapter. They are 100% support. This is it meant a lot because we're talking about this type of history that's going to, now we have to rethink in some ways how we make sure that these guys are included in our history book. But from our general president to our general historian, and specifically the general historian is the authority in terms of determining historical events, as actually excited about this particular history, and gave me the critical support in terms of, even before presenting to Yale, that, like, yes, we're recognizing our members and recognizing this aspect of the history. So we're looking forward to having greater conversations, not just even about these individuals, but also just some of the earlier records, some of our members, because again, during that period, in terms of record keeping, I mean, it was just a different time.
Right.
So we want to make sure that all of our members are represented. and recognize and observe, so we can have more moments like what we just had at Yale. So there's definitely a movement within the fraternity to ensure that we recognize all of our brothers.
Let's I want to reference one of your um, more well-known brothers in terms of MLK would say, where do we go from here, gentlemen? Let's spend 5 or 10 minutes about where do we go from here? People can sometimes criticize fraternities, sororities, and so-called elite groups, but it's clear that the context in your historical DNA, as Al has mentioned, is super strong. But just some thoughts about where do we go from here and how you might be involved individually in crafting that liberation future for future generations. So I know it's really a metaphorical and very broad question, but I want to give us a chance to kind of, if the spirit moves you, to kind of respond to that thought stream.
I'll jump in. Where we go from here is continuing to create these spaces where there's knowledge. So much of Black history gets shrouded in various ways. So this is opportunity to share pieces that become local history. During the conversation this past Monday, we were a couple relatives, descendants of those men were on the call too. So again, it's not that this is just 116 years or 14 years ago. This is experiences connected to New Haveners today, which in the broader sense is connection to New Haven history. And as we always have the contentious relationships at times between Yale and the university, and the Black spaces of New Haven and Black spaces at Yale, these is to show how Blacks at Yale have had this space and have been creating the space. Of course, we know about Dr. Boucher and being the first to receive the PhD, first African American to receive, and that's fantastic. And it's, again, part of building of the legacy that we have. This is another link in that chain of the history that ties African Americans to the experience of Yale and New Haven, and needs to be shared so that we continue that what people have done, because this is a community built and found the basis of which where everyone is tied to the history. We know how proud everyone is if they attended Hill House High School. It is one of the things you find out first or Wilberforce. This is another link of that historical connection within this community.
Excellent. Brother Lucas.
Right. Yeah, I'll jump on there. Speaking of Hill House High School, so one of our chapter alum is Levi Jackson, who was captain of the Yale, first Black captain of the Yale football team, and a proud Hill House High School alum. Levi Jackson at Yale was voted to be the captain of the football team, almost unanimously. There was only one vote that was not for him. It happened to be his own vote. So, we're humble. But the Belford V. Lawson, who we name our oratorical contest, and one of our past general presidents, was director of the Q House in New Haven. And so as the Q House Centennial comes on, when you talk about where we go from here, you'll start to hear some of the connections. As in 2024, we're going to be focusing on the Q House's centennial year.
Perfect.
Start to be hearing some of those connections. Brother Legend referenced the Afro-American Studies program and the Black Student Alliance at Yale and the Afro-American Cultural Center, and mentioned that the Zeta chapter brothers had a hand in that. That's, again, him being a little modest. It was all Zeta chapter brothers at the time that were doing that, because they were the Black men that were on campus at the time, and it was an all-male institution, and so it was them that were doing that, and their pictures hang in the FM house now. So in terms of where we go from here, I think it's very clear to us, as I've said in the past, that we understand that our role is significant to the development of leaders in the world and moving the world forward on behalf of those who've been left behind. And we know that the history of the world, the history of the United States, the history of Connecticut, the history of New Haven, the history of Yale University can't be told without Alpha Phi Alpha's involvement being recognized. So we want to continue that legacy and not just focus on past accomplishments, but continue to make sure we go above and beyond going forward.
Excellent, excellent. Lateef, any thoughts in that regard? Additional ones?
Yeah, no, I think it's I think where do we go from here is as as these historic Black institutions begin to uh, unearth these histories and members, I think it's you're going to see how it influences other institutions. You're like Yale, like Harvard, um, like Cornell, to also recognize and observe these individuals. Uh, I'm reminded of in 1909, 2009, right? That's our centennial year. And one of our chapter brothers, Jeremy Harp, who wrote a piece celebrating our 100 years, but we was like, where's Yale at? And so I think that there is something to see in terms of the institutions beginning to really explore, acknowledge some of these great individuals, great entities that have been a pillar to these institutions. So I see where we're going from there is seeing this influence of other institutions being motivated by what's going on with some of these institutions like Alpha Phi Alpha, other organizations for that matter.
Gentlemen, and again, hopefully you'll allow me to brand you as the three mighty gents for the moment. But with Lateef, with your being involved with higher education out there in the West Coast at Stanford, and Al, again, just thinking about you being involved with students at every level at Yale and in the community for several decades, and Paul, with your being involved with students at Waterbury and Bridgeport. And Paul, I'm not trying to put you on the spot by this question, so you have your brethren to kind of protect you. But from a curriculum educational standpoint, and Al, you mentioned Hill House High School. What are some of the challenges? And again, just looking for some general thoughts about influencing and or improving the high school curriculums, given the strategic position that Paul you hold and Al you hold as a mentor and wise advisor here in New Haven, and just your Alpha membership is so broad, and so many significant educators or members of the fraternity. I was just wondering in general, Paul, to give you a chance to kind of comment about the opportunities to, if not influence curriculum, changing curriculum, improve curriculum. I think I've laid my cards on the table.
No, well, I think it's a moment of great opportunity, particularly with the state requiring Black and Latinx studies to be taught in all high schools. Again, there are a lot of intersection points of this. The same way at the National African American Museum in DC, there is a segment that is dedicated to the Greek letter organizations, commonly called the Divine Nine, which are the nine historically Black Greek letter organizations. It's the same way that as we talk about these courses and social movements and the connections, there is a place to talk about these organizations, but also the contributions that have been made, what the future holds, and the spaces to do that. Kids know many of our schools have drill teams, step teams. They see that social media has connected a lot to these experiences. And so there's a place, and going back to what Brother Lennon has done, there's a way to connect that to New Haveners, particularly. So you see that, you see a Hill House grad did that. You see someone from Wilberforce did this. And the connection, and like I said, it's not just our distant past, but our modern history as well. And so that's a great connection point, both from the civic standpoint, but also from the general African American Latinx perspective as well.
So are there any opportunities to directly impact the courses that are taken, or maybe Paul elaborate on my mind goes to Senator Doug McCrory and your efforts and other efforts to make this option up, but it's optional in terms of I guess the Black Studies, it's not mandatory, but it's
it's required. It's a required course that by next year it'll be a required course in all high schools. So there's no defined coursework in it. So there's room for development in this. What does that look like? There are standards, but the curriculum will vary from district to district. And like I said, in New Haven, I see there's an opportunity to include the local historical perspective in that as well.
Excellent. Brother Lucas, any thoughts? Any thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, let me jump in on that too. Yeah, well, two things. One is a lot of it is infusion and immersion in New Haven, because most of the high-level Black administrators in New Haven belong to these organizations. So it's happening in the system just by showing up to school. At the same time, at the next level, David Prosper over at the University of New Haven, a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, you can appreciate that, is over there running classes. He actually has a class as part of the curriculum over there on the Divine Nine that he's now done, I think, for the last 3 semesters that he has students in. So it is becoming something that is working its way into curriculums in various iterations. And so we find creative ways to do it. There was just a big college fair in New Haven. We had 600 of the public school students come through. And at that event, we made sure that the Black Greek-led organizations, including ours, were featured and present. Many of our students are aware that these organizations exist and even asked the counselors from the various colleges if these organizations exist, because that impacts their interest in whether they want to go there or not. Several of them, just as a footnote, several of them got automatic acceptances that day. So kudos to our local students who have been automatically accepted to various colleges that day. And the ones that they're going to choose are going to be ones that have historically Black fraternities and sororities on them.
Excellent. Brother Lateef?
Yeah, no, and I will say with the aftermath of what's happening with affirmative action in the admission circles, you're going to see more push in terms of what the students are having to say about the connection, whether it's through legacy, whether it's through the various mentorship programs or scholarship opportunities that many of the Divine Nine organizations have in developing the youth. So you're going to see, yes, they can't check a box to say, hey, I am Black or I'm African American, but you will see it in other aspects of the applications, whether it's through their extracurricular activities, whether it's through their personal essays. So we're going to see a different dynamic in terms of how they show up in these admissions applications, and then also how admissions professionals will be responding to the way these students are showing up during this post-affirmative action space.
About 8 more minutes, gentlemen. So what's on your minds, spirit and body and soul-wise, as we kind of engage one another for these remaining 9 minutes?
Well, I think this all of this issue that's happening to the college presidents of these elite institutions, many of them who are either women or people of color or both, is something that there needs to be heightened engagement from our organizations and organizations such as ours on. They have been made targets for something that they that they have not taken any um, negative movement in. You know, they've answered some questions to a congressional hearing, and now they're being asked to resign from their various seats. And I think the Harvard faculty came out relatively strong and behind their president. The board of governors there has been relatively silent on this one. Penn obviously went totally in the opposite direction and forced their president to resign. And then MIT, their board of trustees came out very strongly in backing their particular president. But I think this is an opportunity for organizations like ours to really stand up, because without these organizations and without an focus on inclusion and a focus on being open to have conversations and opening people's eyes, the place that we have on these campuses is not really being taking advantage of the presence that we have and the history that we have and the connection that we have. So I think there's an opportunity for these organizations to step up and really have a conversation back, and our members who are in Congress to talk to their fellow Congresspeople about that.
Indeed. Brother Legend?
Yeah, no, I actually echo the sentiments of Brother Lucas on this. You know, the Divine Nine, these have some credible pioneers, right? From your Martin Luther Kings. How many Martin Luther King institutes are at these various institutions, right? To when you think of Shirley Chisholm, Rosa Parks, all these notable figures that we celebrate and within these various institutions, but taking the lessons from them, right?
Yes.
You know, Martin Luther King gave us a blueprint. Thurgood Marshall has given us a blueprint. Frederick Douglass. So I think it will be for many of these prominent institutions to engage with the Divine Nine on these matters to help ease the one, try to ease some of the polarizations that's going on in the country. But then two, figuring out solutions that can help move the conversation forward, right? Because right now the tensions are very high, and all it takes is one word, one slip up, and you know you're the enemy, right? And so I think having these engagements with these historic organizations like the NAACP, like the Urban League, I think will help many of these institutions and how they navigate these conversations, because it's not just what's going on in the Middle East, but it's what's going on in America.
That's right.
And so I think that if more engagement with these historic institutions, I think there's a lot of lessons that we can glean from this, but also guidance in how we can move forward to have a more inclusive, diverse, belonging community that many of these institutions boast and ascribe.
Dr. Paul White, I should say neighbor. You're around the corner. We're around the corner from one another.
Yes.
What are your thoughts in this regard as we wind down?
Absolutely. We need a space for dialogue and to hear dissenting voices, because that's the only way we've ever advanced is through dialogue and hearing other sides and hearing all voices in situations so that we can move forward. The engagement, understanding, all of those things, because there's so many issues in our nation that have to be dealt with and addressed, as well as internationally. So it really is about creating the space for dialogue to have difficult conversations.
I want to give everyone a minute or so for the last word as we kind of wind down. And I'll throw out, Brother Al, you mentioned about the Negro youth, and I'm always amused how we've gone from Negro to African, African American to mestizo to well, you name it, Creole. So our identity has always been subject to media's manipulation. But in terms of youth, I want to ask the three of you to kind of take a minute or so and just address what do you want to say to our young folks these days about their future, and what kind of encouragement or thoughts or even challenges might you want to propose to them? Because truly, not to get too personal, I think Latif, you're a little younger than the rest of us, but uh, Paul and Al and myself, we're if we're not in the winter of our life, we hope to have. But I think you get my drift. But what do the three of you want to say to some of the young folks? Because we'll share this show widely with folks, particularly young people that are just emerging in terms of their identity and their inspiration and their psychic mental stability, et cetera. Brother Al, I'll start to you, and then Latif, and then Paul, I'll give you the last word.
What I say to them are two things. One is all the great names, all the great people that you hear about, all the people that there are statues for and monuments for and plaques about and books about, they all started out just like you. They sat in the same classrooms, the same high schools. They didn't like certain classes. They were annoyed about certain things. They had their first job just like you did. And so understand that you're on the same trajectory and path that they're on. And eventually somebody's going to be writing books and monuments and plaques and all those things about you. But I followed it up by saying, if you look at when their greatness is celebrated or begins to be celebrated, it's after preparation. There's a sense that a lot of these things happen overnight. Like, Dr. King was born and all of a sudden he was running a busboy guy. And so and then he was given a speech and then he got killed. But he had a dream before he got killed, right? So I just emphasize that to them, that they look at these folks, just prepare yourselves for the greatness that is your destiny.
Latif?
I would say that, and I say this to plenty of you to this very day, excellence can never be denied or suppressed. And, it takes a village, right? As Brother Lucas said, when you think of Martin Luther King, it's like he's born and next thing you know, he's this civil rights legend. No, it was a community, right? It was the teachers. It was the lady in the church that pulled him to the side. It's basically this amalgamation of people that want to see you succeed. And one, it's okay to ask for help. Okay. You don't have to be Superman or Superwoman or super whoever. Just receive the help so then you can be that super individual, whatever you want to be. And that that's when you look at these notable figures from that we just mentioned, it came from this community of people that wanting to help see you reach your greatness and reach your excellence. And believe me, once you get there, it can never be denied, never be suppressed.
And Paul, I want to get before I ask you to speak, just occurred to me that with your background with in Waterbury and then Bridgeport with I wouldn't say a private school movement, but you've been on the public and private sector in terms of educational experience. I won't say educational experiments, just various ways of finding and instituting educational quality. So maybe incorporate some of that too in terms of as you give your closing remarks, because I think there's so many ways for folks to
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would say, well, what I say to youth and frequently, thankfully, get to experience, have time with them every day, is really about the hard work is worth it. There's a lot of things that are going to take some time to get done, but put in the effort. Don't give up on yourself. You can get to the dreams you have. Don't take the quick way out. It's not it's not worth it. There are lots of things that appear to be an easy ways to get money, sometimes fame, but it's not. Those are fleeting. You have to work on things to build who you are and build your brand, build who you are going to be, so that when people hear your name, they say, "Oh, that's a good guy. That's a good person. That's a great woman," and know that you are introduced by your deeds as opposed to trying to figure out who you are.
Hmm.
And that comes from across all educational spectrums: charter schools, traditional public schools, private schools. It's really about how you develop the character of the individuals attending these schools.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much. That's kind of a wrap, as they say in this particular forum. But Lateef, you've teased me in terms of the divinity school connection, so I'm going to follow up with you in that regard and make sure that the folks at the Yale Divinity School are aware of this really important seminal activity from the Alpha Phi Alpha legend, and that they perhaps incorporate it very soon. So I'll reach out to you, quite frankly, probably tomorrow. Gentlemen, thank you so much for everything, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.